starting this morning on ending toxic impunity. I want to thank those who are online and those who are in the room for our friends from the IPAN community, because this event is happening on the margin of the Basel Rotterdam Stockholm Convention Conference of the Parties, which is taking place these weeks here in Geneva. And the negotiation ended up very, very late last night, late in the night. So I'd like to really thank those who were able to make it. And we might have some other people coming in during the day. Some of them are perhaps joining online. So we will have this morning quite interesting. We're looking forward to having a quite interesting discussion with Professor Marcos Orellana, who is the UN Special Rapporteur on toxics and human rights. Because Marcos Orellana is right now preparing a report to be presented to the Human Rights Council on access to justice and remedies, and a particularly important issue. And so the report will be precisely looking at the different remedies and the procedures. And as we're hearing in the conference of the parties that I've just described, the question of implementation of these conventions and how it articulates with the national conventions, and how we really have a process leading to a toxic-free environment is quite crucial. And precisely, we're also very happy to have the discussion with Semia, who is very well known, who is the 2025, one of the 2025 winners of the Goldman Prize, which is considered a bit as the Nobel Prize in the field of environment. And because Semia, you've led a very important campaign in your country, in Tunisia, where precisely this is one of the interesting examples of possible form of implementation of against the damage. Now, these laws are usually trying to avoid damages, but once you have a damage, you need a remedy, you need this to be solved, you need reparation. So it will be very, very interesting to hear your experience, to hear what you've been able to do with the campaign. And what will be also interesting is to see how it was articulated with the work of the UN Special Rapporteur on toxics and human rights, because very often we are not aware enough of how the international level can really interact with the local, with the national or the local levels. And I think here this is a very good example. And then for those who are in the room, we'll be looking forward also to talk about other possible examples of access to remedies. And unfortunately, these are cases who are well known are usually cases of non-implementation, where the remedies precisely are not being affected. And then, which means that impunity continues in the field of toxics. So I think the very first thing I'll start is by giving the floor to Professor Marcos Orellana as a special rapporteur, so that you can share with us how you view these issues, and also if you want to correct or modify some of the elements of my own presentation. Marcos, thank you for being with us, and thank you for being with us for the whole week at these BRS COPs, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Yves, and thank you for once again convening this a session in the context of the Geneva Toxic Free Talks. I'll be very brief in these introductory remarks, because I on substance would very much want to comment after Semia Garbi's presentation on her experience and efforts to deal with the case study of the export of a number of containers, hundreds of containers laden with waste from Italy to Tunisia. What I can say at this time is that in regards to what you put on the table, Yves, thematic reports are one of the tools available for special procedure mandate holders of the Human Rights Council to carry out our monitoring and reporting mandate. Thematic reports in a way combine what is research and documentation with analysis of real-world case studies that showcase the importance of the topics that are being addressed. In this year's report, I intend to address and analyze what are the obstacles that victims of toxic exposure often face when attempting to access justice and an effective remedy. And so the specific focus is the context of toxics. There's a number of obstacles that are leading to impunity, and it is my goal and aspiration that this report may help both with its findings and recommendations to for countries to strengthen their legal systems in order for their judicial and other remedies to be not illusory but really available to victims of toxic exposure. There's transboundary dimensions to this problem. There's of course internal legal issues to be addressed. But as we've seen in other areas of environmental policy making, such as in what would say the proliferation of climate litigation, which is quite welcome in regards to the evident paralysis or slow pace of climate action, we have not seen similar movement in the area of toxics, despite the increasing toxification of our planet. And so there's many lessons that perhaps we can learn from that. And more than that, there's many obstacles that need to be systematically and systemically addressed in order for victims to have access to a real remedy. This is the last thing I'll say, is that a focus on access to justice and remedy is, we're not going to solve the toxification of the problem with one court case after another. This is an important element of a much broader policy mix that should be put in place that focuses on prevention. And so there's issues of regulation. You mentioned that the context of our conversation here is the Conference of the Parties of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions. These instruments need to be strengthened, need to be made to work more effectively. The global framework on chemicals agreed in the last, the 5th session of the International Conference on Chemicals Management. That is a framework that also needs to be implemented so that institutions and regulations at the national level are made stronger and are able to move policies towards the sound management of chemicals and wastes. But having said all that, so the critical role of prevention and strengthening capacities, institutions, norms, international cooperation, at the end of the day, if everything else fails, it is a fundamental principle of international human rights law that victims of human rights violations should deserve a remedy. They must be afforded a judicial or other remedies that make up whole for the damage suffered. And that is the focus of my next thematic report. And so in that light, this conversation is most welcome. And I have other comments that I wish to make on Semia's case study, and I'll hold on to those after Semia has a chance to present. Thank you so much for convening this once again. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Marcos. So now I'll turn to you, Semia. Once again, thank you very much for being with us on this Saturday morning. As it was said, your experience is a quite important one and will give us a lot of thoughts on this issue. But perhaps when you start, can you present a bit more widely your action in Tunisia? I've been very brief in the presentation of your work, but you're a well-known educator in the field of environment. You're leading an organization in this field in Tunisia. You're also one of the leaders of Réseau Tunisie Verte, if I'm correct. So the Goldman Prize that you have is not only just linked to this very successful campaign you did. There is also behind the whole work you've devoted your life to these issues and to getting Tunisia greener. So can you say, just before you present the case itself, a bit more about the action that is behind the success you had with this campaign?
Thank you so much, Yves, and thank you for this great opportunity to discuss more and to open perhaps the door for explanation about the different issues and environmental problematics. Yes, indeed. So you can say that as you mentioned, so I'm an educator. In my background is as a science environment, and as educator, so it is really, so you feel like you have the duty so to do as much as you can when you have to protect people and you have in front of you a lot of generations. So that's like give you more engagement. So that's one, and also we are also the hub of IPEN for MENA region. Also, we are working on a toxic-free future. So to highlight the problem and on the toxicities of chemicals like pesticides, like lead and paint, like mercury, like the plastics, and so on. So such common and global problems we are also trying to work on in Tunisia for the only goal it is to protect human health and environment. So and with this is like the engagement within the international levels, within the different frameworks of conventions. So it is also an opportunity to look more in deep to work on policies, environmental policies, and to participate. So with the whole networks and with the whole global civil society, so how we can move forward to have better life and the human rights to have a healthy environment. So I think it is really a great picture, and each of us is really adding its pieces so for global human health protection.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So that says a lot about your involvement in this campaign. So tell us more now about the case itself. What was the waste that was polluting Tunisia, which you had to confront yourself with?
Yeah, indeed. So as I mentioned, so we are really as our national NGO, AFG, is really engaged at the international level. So we heard and we tried also with all our colleagues at the international level, so to push and to limit this problem of illegal waste in different countries. But when it happened in Tunisia, so it was for me really a big shock, because it was likely, oh, so it is coming to us. And when it was highlighted by the government that we received illegal waste, so as a member co-founder of also the Réseau Tunisie Verte, so we took our role to support our government for one goal: it is the reshipment of the waste. So whatever, so we were working, we are putting all the efforts so to reship and to support our government, because it is really unacceptable so to receive the waste of others. We already have our problem in managing our waste and how to manage the waste of others. So that's one. But in general, so the waste cannot be exported. So in general, we export goods, but not waste. So I think this is also a big problem of like a shipment of the waste. And we started really our campaign seriously, and it was like almost 2 years, non-stop 2 years of campaign. And the campaign, if I have to summarize the campaign, it was really at 3 levels. So it was the national level, because we got also our journalists, other social media. So all they have done their job. So to highlight this issue, and it was really known by almost all the population that we received the illegal waste. So that's one. So people, even they don't know about the Basel Convention or the international law or the national law, but they heard about this. So that means the importance of the journalists also to support your work, and also the national NGOs, different national NGOs were also supporting. We worked at the regional level, as Tunisia belongs to African continent, so we got a lot of support from our colleague from the African region, and we tried to push with our Bamako Convention, because we have the Bamako Convention for the continent, and it is more restrictive than the Basel Convention, because it is banning what are all kinds of waste. So we were like trying to use it, even it is not really reinforced, but it is like a convention, so we tried to push and to use it for our case. And then at the international level also, we got a lot of support really from all our colleagues from the different networks over the globe, and really we got a lot of support from them, each from their own expertises. So from making with us reports, working with us. So we got also the European civil society making a pressure, because it was like the waste coming from Italy. So our colleague from the European, the civil society from Europe, so they done also a great job, so making a pressure on the parliament, and they worked with the ecological parliament delegates, and until today we have like a questionnaire so about why this like illegal waste so done. So which means like we were really supported. So and it was during 2 years, and also no one like was tired so to support us, which is really we are really very thankful for that. And the results of that, so it was like the amendment of the law in Europe, so about the waste. And we got also the support from Marcos, which was really a great support. We can really say that it is like a big push, and Marcos put between our hands so 2 assistants to work on a report. It was like for 2 months we were like working really on a report, and Marcos took this issue within the global folder to the government of Italy in December, from 17th of December, and talking about the issue of the illegal waste to Tunisia, shipped to Tunisia, although there is the Basel Convention. That means even the convention is here, but we got the illegal waste, which means that there are some weakness in some part of the articles that we would like so to be reinforced. And each done added pieces, but I think also this is like analysis after the visit of Marcos. So in December 2021, so it was like the reshipment started in February. So the January was like between the two governments. So Italy government responded to the request of the Tunisian government, so to reship the waste, the illegal waste. It was about 212 because the 70 they were in the house where like it was. They were took from the port from the beginning because it was like about the waste notified the right like waste, but then the customs found that they are not. So like it is kept on the land, but the 212 containers on the port were shipped. So I think this is we can say it is a success story for all, and the lesson learned. So it is like when we work together. So a national, regional, international level. So we can push for limiting and remediation of the like the damage caused for the countries or population or whatever. So I think this is really very important, and also it is very important to have an international frame where you can like really act. So because this is also very important, and you have a legal and regulation, so you can refer to. And you can also say like this should be like reinforced, or because if you get a problem, so which means there are somewhere some weakness, so we have to fill the gaps.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. This is quite amazing to see that the illegal waste was shipped back. So just to make sure that I understood it well, this waste was coming from Italy, right? From a European country, exactly. But it was Italy. And did you know exactly what type of waste it was?
It was like a municipal waste, and yeah, and even for Tunisian law, it is like it's not allowed to receive the municipal waste. So, and the first notification, it was about the plastic recycling waste, a clean plastic waste.
So okay, so they cheated in the way they labeled the waste.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. But the customs found when they verified after 1 month, so the 70 containers like put in the manufacturing the society. So the building, so they returned back after 1 month and verified is it wrong. Okay. As notified, they found is not the right shipment, so they reacted. So the government, and then
so that's when the scandal started.
Exactly. Okay. So it was really highlighted by the government. So that's why it was for us our duty so to support our government.
Can we say that it made a change, that the government itself recognized that this was illegal shipping?
For sure. But I mean, it is the duty of the customs, that's first, because the duty of customs is to verify after 1 month the shipment. So the part of the shipment. So this is like following the law in Tunisia. So when it is something coming from outside the export, so they verify after 1 month, yeah, if it is really the right one or not.
Because they don't open it when it comes in.
Yeah, normally they saw like they trust. But they verify, right. But they trust what is notified and coming from outside. But then they have the duty to verify. So that's when they verified it wasn't the case.
That's interesting because it does make a difference when you verify afterwards. Because we know that there's so many containers going in all of the ports in the world today that most of them are not verified. I mean, it's only a very small amount which can be verified. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to trade anymore. Exactly. So that's quite interesting. So that's the fact that the government was engaged made a real difference. Mm-hmm. then how did you get the information? I'll turn to Marcos Orellana just to continue on the case. When did you get the information, Marcos, that this case was existing in Tunisia and this export coming from Italy?
Thanks, Yves, and thanks, Semia, for that presentation and also for recalling what was the action at that time. I learned about this case when Semia reached out.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that underscores the importance of special procedures of the Human Rights Council as tools for engagement of the human rights machinery of the United Nations with people at the very local ground. Otherwise, what could happen is and what has happened in the past, and what still happens in certain circles is that there are bubbles of international policy making that begin to turn and spin on themselves without ever connecting with what's happening in the real world. And so I think this speaks to the importance of special procedures, as it were, as in Spanish you say un cable a tierra. So the metaphor is that you anchor and connect with reality on the ground.
That's interesting because actually, Marcos, you are working in you're linked. Your mandate is linked to the Human Rights Council, which is a body working on human rights in general. Nothing to do, if I can put it like that, with the multilateral environment agreement, like the Basel. In here, we're talking about the Basel Convention. So it's a bit two legal regimes. So what you're saying, Marcos, is that actually the fact that as a special rapporteur, you're able to act also for other legal fields, like, for example, for something which is relevant to the Basel Convention.
Well, I think the short answer to that is absolutely yes, and the legal background and platform for doing that is recognizing that international human rights law exists independently of any other multilateral environmental agreement, and that multilateral environmental agreements are also independent of international human rights law, and so they may coincide, and when they address a subject matter such as toxics concurrently, it doesn't mean that the Basel Convention, for example, will displace human rights obligations. It means that both coexist and they can synergize. And so the special procedure of the Council in a case such as this one, we'll look at the specificity of the facts and will apply human rights norms. And in interpreting those norms, international environmental agreements can be quite helpful. There's also, I will say as a parenthesis, very interesting jurisprudence coming out from the African Court of Human and People's Rights in a case involving the dumping of hazardous waste in Abidjan, in Cote d'Ivoire, by Trafigura, so the big commodities trading company, the Probo Koala case, where the court, in its analysis, looked very closely at the Bamako Convention and its standards to inform its interpretation of the right to a healthy environment, and that is recognized and guaranteed in the African Charter of Human and People's Rights. Yeah, so that's one point on that specific question. But if I can make a couple other perhaps broader reflections. One is that the mandate on toxics and human rights was created by at the time the UN Human Rights Commission in 1995, focusing on toxic waste, on hazardous waste. And because of the concern precisely that the path of least resistance in dealing with these hazardous wastes, as Europe was strengthening its laws on waste management and disposal and so forth, was precisely to put them on a vessel and ship them and dump them in Africa. That was what was happening at the time. That's why the Basel Convention was created, to put an end to, at the time, was denounced as environmental racism and toxic colonialism. That is why this mandate was created. The mandate has been reframed in time. It no longer focuses exclusively on hazardous waste. It now addresses the life cycle of chemicals and waste and the sound management thereof. And so it has been renewed every time over the last few years since the Human Rights Council has been in existence by consensus. So this has great implications for the mandate. But a couple things flow from that. One is that the mandate is created, not to get too specific in the details, by a resolution of the Human Rights Council. No? So this is a document and there's various paragraphs, and one of the paragraphs speaks to technical assistance. And this is often overlooked, I would say, because I think governments don't use this enough. They could very well approach mandate holders with requests for technical assistance. But civil society at sometimes do present requests. They can be requests for looking at specific issues, such as a communication, or they can be an outright request for assistance. And when confronted or when receiving such a request, mandate holders then have grounds to act. And the first step, and as Semia pointed out, we spent several months doing fact-checking on what was the situation in regards to the Italian legislation, what had happened in Italy, in regards to the movement, how, when, who, what, the factual issues, and then what was happening with the waste in Tunisia. Where was it? What was the situation? So that's another reflection I thought I'd underscore, that in the resolution of that creates or renews the mandate, there is the basis for the action that was taken in this area. And if we compare that with, say, the Basel Convention, that again predates the mandate, and like several other multilateral environmental agreements, establishes a compliance committee or a committee to facilitate implementation. The names vary, but the focus of the work of those committees is non-confrontational, to enable and assist and strengthen capacities for compliance. But there is no way for civil society to request such committees to take action or to look at a file. It has to be by a party. There are various ways of triggering the action of the committees, but there's no way for NGOs to trigger that. So there's a huge limitation, which again underscores the importance then of special rapporteurs taking on this work in order to make MEAs more effective. So at the end of the day, I have a couple other reflections, but I thought I'd stop there because maybe you have other questions.
No, well, we'll come back to you for the other reflections. I wanted to see, how did the authorities, both on your side, Semia, and on your side, Marcos, how did they react on the? I guess that's the Tunisian authorities were happy to get some support from outside or to get some support from the civil society because they were themselves denouncing it. If I understood well, they the one who triggered the whole process, saying here we have a scandal. But then how did the Italian and European authorities react? What was your feeling, Semia, and after Marcos?
For us, so as I mentioned, so it was like highlighted by the government. So we have done our role as civil society to support our government. So it was like 2 years working with the government. So when we have information, for example, we got information from outside. So because a lot of civil society helped us with the information about the shipment. So we brought this kind of information to the to the national authorities, which means that we were really aligned for our work with the national authorities.
But yourself, you did not have contacts directly with the Italian authorities, your organizations?
No, it wasn't like
Okay.
direct, because you know that we didn't get out of our role as a civil society, because Italian is government, so we kept this for between government and government. So that's but we got like some NGOs, Tunisian NGOs, they have done like a demonstration in front of the Italian embassy, but the reaction wasn't really. It was a smooth reaction, but it wasn't like an achievement after that, because it was likely okay. So we know, and that's it. But as au Tunisie vert, we continue like our work, just to highlight, to make some petitions, to work to inform our government about where we are, so where we were. So that's kind of, so it was really interconnected work. It wasn't like something outside of the. It was for Tunisia. We worked together, so the government and civil society for Tunisia.
In Tunisia, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you had yourself some contact with Italian NGOs. And with European NGOs, that's what you said. Okay, that's how you made the connections.
Yeah, that's true. This is also, we have to be thankful also for our colleague, the NGOs, civil society from Italy, and also the journalists also from Italy who highlighted the issue. So, and we were invited in one of their events and to talk about this issue. So I think the civil society, where they are, so we talk the same language. I mean, this is really very important. So it is the same language to protect human health. So you don't do like a difference between who you are or you are from where. So that's something really very important. And it is also lesson learned that the civil society over the world, they are really together, and they support whatever in environment it is like to protect human health and the environment. So also that the Italian civil society played a role. So for sure they contacted, they have done like a lot of job, but it was like, as I mentioned, it was like each added the piece for this achievement. So it is like a puzzle, and so each of us so added it. So it is a joint effort, really. It is a joint effort, and as Marcos said, so it is also to understand how we can use the different international like frameworks of the multilateral agreements. This is also very important as a civil society, because that's when you go, for example, to the instance like the special rapporteur, because using the law, so, and which is connected, so it is interconnected for environment, whatever the MAAs for environment, so they are interconnected. So it is like to reinforce, to work with these instruments, because without a regulation, we cannot really achieve. But this regulation can help, and we can really highlight where we reinforce things, so to protect more the others. So that's the steps we all will work for.
Okay, so thank you. So Marcos, your mandate basically is providing a capacity and access that people or organization would not have under the Basel Convention, which is dealing with this question of movement of waste. Now, in doing this, how were you greeted by the Italian authorities? And another question is, how did the decision of the reshipment, of the return, was taken? Because you might have just said, okay, we'll pay for the repair, and that's it. How was the final decision taken so that the waste went back to where it was coming from?
Yeah, so on the first question of engagement with the Italian authorities, one of the first things that I set out to do was to figure out what was the most effective means of intervention in this case, given the mandate's tools, and those include, as I mentioned in the introduction, thematic reports that sometimes refer to cases. They include letters of allegation that are presented to governments, sometimes companies, and they create a dialogue. And they also include country visits, official country visits. Now, those are by invitation of the government. Now, several governments have standing invitations, so basically come whenever you want, if we can agree on dates. Now, let's recall, back in 2021, we were still in the pandemic of the coronavirus. It was, borders were closed. It was very hard to move across countries. But there was an opening to visit Italy in December of 2021, and I very quickly seized on that, also because my mandate had received other information concerning Italy that a country visit would allow for examination as well. So two things on that, and the mandate on toxics and human rights of the Human Rights Council is a global mandate. And there's a lot happening around the world, and it's not just transboundary movements of waste. It's people being exposed to hazardous substances, chemicals, and waste that affect their basic rights to life, health, healthy environment, among others. And so capacities are limited, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know. But the ability to engage the range of requests that are presented to the mandate is limited, and so having a tool that allows to address various issues became the way to go forward for my mandate. So the country visit to Italy looked at, for example, the releases of PFAS in the Veneto area in the north. There were more than 100,000 people exposed because of contamination in drinking water. It looked at sacrifice zones in the south. I was very pleased to see that in a very recent decision, the European Court of Human Rights referred to my country visit report in its analysis of the due diligence of the state in dealing with the hazardous waste issue and other wastes issues, including the burning of wastes in this area. So there's a broader context for country visits, but then the situation involving the export of containers with wastes from the Naples area was a big element of the visit. And so, as in any visit and every visit, there's conversations and meetings with authorities at various levels of government, depending on the issues. And so I will say that, and as I mentioned in the report and in the various documents that are prepared in an official country visit, the end of mission statement, the press release, and then the actual report presented in writing to the council and followed by an interactive dialogue, that the engagement of Italian authorities was at all times and at every level incredibly constructive. It was not only a matter of hospitality of the Italian people, which is also remarkable. I want to say that very clearly, but also the engagement of the authorities, because some of these visits, they can come across as a finger-pointing exercise because of the denunciations of human rights violations. There's certainly an element of that, but it's not so much finger-pointing, it's more putting attention on issues that need to be addressed, where there are challenges, where there are laws that need to be strengthened or practices that need to be changed. On the one hand, also identifying good practices, because this is a tool for international cooperation where other countries can learn of what's being done well. So in the specifics of the case involving the containers, the authorities in Naples, I will say, they were very clear on what were the obstacles in dealing with the return of the containers, because Italian law, European law, the Basel Convention, it provides for very clear timelines, but those were not being respected. There's a whole range of procedures. There were court cases. I won't get into the specifics. We would take a long time. And all of that, it was causing significant delay. But it was clear to me that the authorities wanted to solve the problem and bring the containers back, which is one element. But then there's the element of accountability and the people responsible for the export of waste. And I don't mean the authority. The authorities are checking papers, no? They receive a paper, it says it characterizes the waste, stamp, go. Now, that's a limitation of the procedures. There should be inspections. I make these points in my report at the end of it with concrete recommendations on how Italian law should be strengthened, how European law should be strengthened. Several of those, I will say, as parentheses, have been taken on board. And as Semia mentioned, European laws have been strengthened. There's still things that need to be addressed. I mean, this is work in progress. Anyways, close parenthesis. So back to the point on accountability, the Italian police became involved. The Carabinieri, they have a special unit on environmental crime. I met with them as well. I reported on their activities generally and specifically on so they investigated this issue, and the people responsible for this situation were prosecuted, and several are in jail. And so this speaks not only to the importance of remedies, civil remedies, as it were, or in terms of comprehensive reparations, be it compensation or restoration, cleanup. It also speaks to accountability for environmental crime and adequate penalties imposed given the severity of the crimes.
Yeah, thank you very much to both of you, because usually we don't get into the details. You see the headlines, you see, oh, there's a scandal, and then later you see another headline, oh, the ship all went back, and you say, oh, that's great, it works. But you don't know how all the process that goes behind that. And it's interesting to see that not only you have different legal regimes, which needs to be pushed, because here you have international environmental law convention, international human rights law with the mandate, but then at the more national level, you have a number of other ministries, authorities that have to be involved in order for this to succeed. So thank you very much for these details. I mean, this is really a remarkable example of a successful campaign. But it means also 2 years of work. It means, as you described it very well, Marcos, a number of people, authorities, instances also involved, just to make a wrong right back again. But of course, at the beginning, the wrong should not have happened. So do you have the impression that also what has been improved, the different improvements out of this case, this has also strengthened the prevention aspect, that it helps also to avoid more of these cases to happen, at least, let's say, from Italy, because they were directly concerned, but perhaps also from Europe? I don't know, what is your feeling of both of you out of this experience? Semia, you start, and I'll give the floor afterwards to Marcos on that.
Yeah, thank you, Yves. So we have seen that, as Marcos said, so the enforcement and the mandate, like the amendment of the law in Europe. So, and we will see, for example, in 2027, the ban from Europe or the export of the waste. But sometimes we are really, so we are achieving many good points through this process. But for example, now we are seeing that Europe, before banning, they opened the door for those they would like so to receive some kind of waste. So that's it is challenging, really. So this is before the timeline of the banning of any waste export, and we have seen, like in the list of countries demanding the export of the import of waste. So I think That's perhaps should be like also taken in account, because this is will reopen like the door we are trying to close for the developing countries, but because when you see it is for all the list of developing countries, for the one reasons it is we don't have the capacities to control. And also when Europe declare this is the criteria, so you have, if you can manage, okay, so they can say that we can manage, but what about the control of toxic chemicals in these ways? We don't have the capacities to do that. So it is like, we would like so to see more restrictive criteria. If you open the door, it is more restrictive criteria. And as civil society, we got like a meeting with some representative from the EU. We asked many questions to them, and also we asked when, okay, so when you export, who, if it will be a problem, who will be in charge of this problem? Is it the exported countries or the imported? Because you put criteria. So this is really challenging, and we hope that the Basel Convention will be the one to really to limit this kind of problem, because the waste all the time you can have a lot of toxic chemicals inside. And really the question, if it is a valuable waste, so why it is not really taken in the territory of Europe, so to be like to add the value, why they are exported? Because we know when it is something very valuable, so it will really, no one will export that. So I think this is also it is out of the Basel Convention. This, like the opening this door, it is out of the Basel Convention because it is specifically for Europe. But we would like so Basel Convention to take in account this, to cover this for us, and also that's why we would like so the Bamako Convention to be reinforced and to have the collaboration between Basel Convention and the Bamako Convention.
So we have the Bamako Convention for Africa because African states thought that the Basel Convention was not strong enough, right? Mm-hmm. And needed to be strengthened. And you have the impression right now that the EU and the Western states are trying to open doors in what is normally a ban to export these type of toxic waste, right?
Yeah, that means they are not saying it's toxic, but I don't know inside, so we don't have the capacity to control.
They just want to export waste, which will be so good for your economy.
Yeah, exactly. So waste, what will be the add value for our economy? So that's kind of question we would like so to have. At least we have like scientifically, when you do you choose an act, so you have to prove this act scientifically. What is the add value? What is the economy part? What is, so we need to this transparency, even for us as a population, not only civil society, but as a population, we need to know why this. So I think this is very, very important to be transparent on that.
Thank you. Marcos, what is your view as Special Rapporteur on these elements? And I know you had also a few other questions perhaps in mind you wanted to raise, so please.
Well, the other observations I think I already made, but on your point and on Semia's points here, I have three reflections to share. One is on the point of linear thinking. I think we as humanity, will say, the modes of mentality in dealing with waste have largely followed a linear path of extraction, production, waste. And that model is leading us towards unsustainable forms of production and consumption that need to change. On the one hand, it leads to externalization of costs at the end of the day. So the prices of products, which in our market economy align or assign resources and so forth, they should reflect the real cost of those goods. And that's not just the extraction and the production, but also at the end of the day, what happens with the waste. That begins to internalize cost. If that were part of the equation, and if we could move to a more holistic, circular way of thinking, many things will change. Now, pressures against internalizing those costs are huge. Competitiveness now. So if prices are higher because these costs are incorporated, well, the goods become more costly in a competitive economy open to international trade. If a country moves in that direction and others don't, it is often said that it's put at a competitive disadvantage. So there's a lot of pressure not to do this. And that again needs to be overcome, and that's where international cooperation is quite relevant. So that's a first point on linear thinking. A second point is on illegal activity. So we have laws and norms and institutions and a whole range of activities that operate within a framework of legality. And then we have illegal activity, whether it's just plain civil wrongs or actual criminal activity. And in this area, we have criminal activity going on. The Italian NGOs have coined a term for this, eco-mafia. The Italian state has attempted to deal with this by strengthening its prosecutions, by strengthening its criminal code, so that they're not just misdemeanors, but actual crimes with stiffer penalties. There's other measures that have been taken. I won't elaborate on all the specifics. But I will say that much action takes place behind the scenes. Let me give you a couple examples. I have had, in connection with this case, had the opportunity to speak at hearings in the European Parliament on how to use criminal law for the protection of the environment, and the EU is moving in this direction. This is not reported in much. There is also work that I have undertaken with the agencies at the EU that work on cooperation between EU member states in fighting cross-border environmental crime in the area of toxics. So there's much activity that needs to focus on the illegal side of things, and that's a big element. So that's the second point, and the third is going to what Samuel was pointing. Waste is a business. No, is also a business. It's and so it's often said, well, countries may not want to export their waste in order to keep the business for themselves. And some say that's protectionism, and that's depriving other countries from the opportunity to do business themselves and for sustainable development. Okay, that line of argument, I think, is quite limited precisely because of what Samia pointed out. There's very little, if any, information on the toxic additives, elements, toxic characteristics of the waste that's traded. And that's because the chemicals in products, information on chemicals in products is very limited. It's incredibly hard to find. And then the leachate, so this is the contaminated waters that come out of landfills and they need to be managed. In countries that have characterized and sampled those, they find all kinds of very hazardous stuff, including PFAS, short-chained, long-chained, heavy metals, so toxic. Without the capacity to manage soundly that leachate, it means that the waste, sure, it's a business, but the cost of managing and the cost of then the pollution and the exposure of people doesn't get factored in the price again. So we again have externalities. And then what does that mean? In a big picture, I will say that a global economy premised on citizens of first class and then citizens of second class, where second class citizens are condemned and exposed to hazardous substances and human rights are infringed systematically because of this waste trade.
And this makes it particularly a human rights issue.
Of course.
Well, thank you very much for these elements. As we're talking about this ending toxic impunity, and here we have a case where impunity did not win, precisely, where there was not impunity. What are your feelings, on both of you, on the general trends, precisely in terms of access to remedies, and because here we have a very good example, but we see that it's costly. It needs a lot of time. So definitely we need more efficient process, and you've been addressing that. But when we see other, emblematic cases, we can think about Bhopal, for example, which is a very old one, where victims, Bhopal is the leakage in India. I mean, the explosion actually of a factory in India, where victims, if I'm correct, still did not really receive any type of compensation. If we see a number of these cases, they're very bad ones, and you have others which are in a way mixed. I'm thinking of La Oroya case, which is this case of still existing very important factory in Bolivia, which has highly contaminated the whole area. It has been condemned now by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. But after how much, 20 years of fight or something like that, and still it does not mean, it means people can receive compensation, but the mine still exists, which means we still have an issue where it's continuing. So I was wondering on your side, and perhaps as in a final part, and perhaps also people here in the room would like to contribute to this reflection. What are the elements we should be focusing on now to have really stronger mechanisms? Because we have the impression, as you said before, Marcos, that this is a waste. And so you have a lot of energy going into making sure that the business continues, and the efforts to regulate it so that it remains, if ever it is a business, that it remains a safe, really safe business, seems to be much lower in terms of its impact, of the number of people who are involved, of the efficiency of the measures. So I was wondering, what are your reflection on this, and what are the main trends you would see? I don't know if you want to start, perhaps, Marcos, on this, because I guess it is probably at the heart of the reflection you're having right now in view of your next report.
Thank you so much. So a reflection on Bhopal. So this is perhaps the worst industrial accident that humanity has ever witnessed and experienced. The impacts of that have been experienced sensitively by thousands, hundreds of thousands of people dead, many more contaminated over the many years that this situation has been lingering. Bhopal became notorious because of the accident involving a gas leak that killed many overnight. But what hasn't received sufficient attention, in my view, was the decades-long mismanagement of hazardous and other wastes released from the facility that suffered the accident. When that dimension of the case was taken to US courts by the victims, because this was a subsidiary of a US corporation, the US courts dismissed the actions, claiming that the US was not the best forum, the most appropriate forum to hear this case. So the doctrine of forum non-convenience, and sent the case to India. But in India, the victims have not had much success in obtaining adequate remedies. And so this is a very clear instance of impunity. The criminal prosecutions against the company in Indian courts have been refused by the company itself. It has refused to appear. The US government has shielded the US corporation from this. So in terms of international cooperation, we see very little that goes towards ensuring access to justice and remedy for the victims. So in breach of international cooperation as required by international human rights law. And so I think Bhopal is in a way a case study that showcases the difficulties of of victims that are poor, that have very few resources, that have been affected in their livelihoods, in their health, and that are dying, many of them, in accessing justice. It leaves a number of lessons in corporate accountability. It leaves a number of lessons in how courts are often unable or unwilling to offer redress. Lessons in the need to strengthen international cooperation. There's so much more that we could say about Bhopal, and perhaps we should. But then going to the second part of your question, it seems to me that there's great progress that has been made over the decades in dealing with hazardous waste transfers across boundaries, especially. Wastes are another matter. We see that, for example, the Basel Convention has been put in place, and so the awareness and the mechanisms to deal with this problem, which before that they were not there. They were simply shipped from one country to another, and that was the end of it. Now we have mechanisms in place, including for the return of the wastes and for criminal penalties. But much remains to be done. Let's look at, for example, the Basel Ban Amendment. So at the time, as you mentioned, African countries that participated in the Basel Convention's negotiations considered that the outcome was not sufficiently protective, and because it did not ban the export of hazardous wastes from OECD countries to non-OECD countries. And so they went and negotiated the Bamako Convention that prohibits the imports of hazardous wastes into Africa. Well, the Basel Ban Amendment tries to address this by precisely banning the export of hazardous waste from OECD to non-OECD countries. There's a couple of nuances there that I won't get into. But that amendment is binding only on the parties that have ratified it, and there's 101 or 100 plus countries that have done so out of 190 plus parties of Basel. So there's still a long way, and we have a big gap there. So that's one example. If we focus on Basel for a moment. If we look at the plastic amendments a couple of years ago, Basel Convention was amended to control in a better way the transboundary movements of plastic wastes. Evidence is coming out now that these amendments have not been particularly effective, that plastic waste has in several instances increased in certain regions. Plastic waste transfers, so movements thereof. So this is plastic waste that's generated in one country, moved to another where it is dumped or burned. There's leakage, and if it's burned, the fumes, and again, back to Semia's point, the toxic additives in the plastics are released, and that exposes often the marginalized poor communities where these plastics are dumped or burned, etc. So we see that there's still a number of gaps in our international tools to confront this issue. Well, human rights is certainly a baseline of decency and an imperative for action. But in order to realize the promise of no one being deprived of the right to life or exposed that will fall ill, and with the recognition of the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment at the global level, there's new tools. But in order to realize this promise, there needs to be strong institutions, norms, strong budgets, and strong action, international cooperation, and we're seeing all of that moving very slowly with the pressures of an economy that is misaligned, that is unable to internalize the costs, and so forth. So I don't want to paint a bleak picture altogether, because much progress has been made. But still, the challenges are monumental in the resource dependent, in our global economy that is addicted to fossil fuel and extraction, that is the consumerism, so the fast fashion mode of consumption where things are single use and then immediately waste is created, where waste is increasing. We have, as humanity, a huge challenge ahead of us.
Thank you very much. Well, that's a big, quite a substantial answer and a big challenge. I was wondering, Samia, if you had any comments on that, and if the others in the room would like to comment on the very last statement of the Special Rapporteur. Samia?
Yeah, thank you, Yves. I think the main important part, it is like in an education field. So whenever you do action or whenever you do a regulation, you have to do after. So what is the efficiency of what you already done? That means this is what we need now. For example, for the Basel Convention, and as Marcos mentioned, so we have some achievements, but the achievements is like, and the frame. It's not really now aligned of what we have now, the realities that we have. So I think this is also a part of the Basel Convention to study how it was really efficient, the Basel Convention, because we have we don't have equity between countries, because some they have a really high technologies, they have the capacities, but the others, so most of the others of the South, they don't have. So how efficient, so the Basel Convention for globally. So because it is, we find that mostly that it is like talking to those that have the capacities, but we need to cover all. That means the gaps, so we are seeing between different countries. So the second point, the Basel Convention is for the control, but it's not for the really, we are not seeing the ban, the real ban. So that's also missing for us. So that's why we need other perhaps instruments, so to support the Basel Convention and to speak to others, like countries that are suffering from the transboundary movements. Also, what we miss, so it is about the toxic chemicals. I mean, this is, okay, the waste, but we have inside, it's not only about management, it is about the control of the waste product, like elements inside. So it is like really a mixture of thousands of chemicals, and we know, and this is the report of UNEP. So only for the plastic, we have like 16,000 of chemicals inside, and we just know a little. And the other, so I will finish with that. So we know that the international conventions are really a very long process. So for banning or for adding something, so you need a long time. So, and because of the discussion, because it is a negotiation, so that's a fact. But what to do between this like timeline between one meeting and the other? So that's also really very important for those that are facing the problem. So I think we have to take into account all of these elements. So really, it is now really needed, because what we don't look to, it is how we have the emergency of a lot of diseases because of the chemicals and pollutants. It is also declared by the WHO. So that's why the waste should be this control. The waste should be also related to the health. So what is the action of this waste on the health? So we would like some, and we need to have also such reports.
Well, it was one of the event representative of ILO were talking about in the world 1 million people dying directly from these type of exposure in occupational health only. We're talking about workers. So I mean, the number of casualties is just huge. Usually it's not heard like that. I don't know if anybody in the, yes, please.
You are around this, huh? representing an NGO for Center for Public Health based in Nepal. What I perceived from Marcos' remark on the Bhopal gas tragedy, like 2 years ago, I was serving as a NROB coordinator. NROB stands for Asia Network for Right of Occupational and Environmental Victims. And that is a network of like 40 labor organizations, labor union in 15 Asian countries. And one of the responsibility falls under my vision is to do the OSS industrial accident mapping. And all of we know that the Bhopal gas tragedy has not been resolved yet, despite it has been happening long time. But while I was doing this occupational health safety mapping across the Asia, at least 4 countries, what I perceived that even every week there is an industrial accident happening from a small to larger scale in India and then other country as well. So what I perceive, despite of all this huge impact caused by Bhopal gas tragedy and long battle fought by the local suffering community, there is no lesson learning at the government part. As of now also, every week there is at least 4 or almost every day there is an accident. And so there is no effective precautionary measures has been taken yet. And this kind of things happening day by day. So how we can deal with that? So negligence at the government part, I see is the major factors. And even these days, in the name of boosting the economy, they relax several environmental laws, including environmental impact assessment, social audit, just in the name of economy. They are relaxing. So that once again jeopardizing the community interest, social interest out of this business. So how we can deal with that? Regarding toxic or waste transportation from one country to another country. Nepal is being landlocked country, so we don't have the sea. So we are in a way that we are privileged not to get the sea landed with but similar kind of things happening. Though we are not getting the sea loaded with the toxic waste, but we are getting every day huge consignment of the product made of toxic plastics, made of recycled plastic that is heavily loaded with toxic chemicals. So though we are not getting toxic waste itself, we are getting toxic product, and that has a double impact. Our children are forced to play with the toxic toy that is heavily loaded with brominated flame retardant, which is like global concern chemicals. And that is the first degree of impact, where the children health is getting impacted. And then after end of the use of that toy, it is becoming waste, where our government is, we don't have capacity to deal with those kind of highly hazardous toxic waste. We don't have facility to deal with. We don't have infrastructure and technology to deal with. So how we can address that kind of thing? So these are the two. And then I linked with what I have said, Marcos, in the beginning, 2 case studies which I wrote Marcos, almost a year ago, I think. One about the toxic towage issue, because in order to address the towage issue, to chemically towage issue, because based on our advocacy work with the government, our government enacted the children towage standards, and that had the 12 chemical in limits in that standard. At some point of time, that standard was challenged by the corporate group, who is the dealer of towage manufacturer in US. So they pressurized enough to our government, and our towage standard is suspended. So that is how the corporate played the role where the good initiative has been killed, and our children are forced to still play with the toxic towage. Despite our country is party to CRC more than 3 years, 3 decades since then, we don't have, as of now, we don't have the act regulation that clearly will ensure the safe play right of the children. That is how I wish to draw your attention. And then finally, as I was explaining, there was a government initiative to test each and every batch of food and vegetable food consignment coming into Nepal for the pesticide residues. It was mandatory decision of the government of Nepal, and that created a lot of tension between India and Nepal, because India supplies more than 50% of the vegetables demands, and they want not any restriction for their exportation of the chemically loaded pesticide loaded vegetable and fruits through like easy to get into our country, and they pressurize enough our government through their diplomatic mission, and are able to revoke, suspend that kind of mandatory provision that our government has taken. So pesticide testing was provoked at the moment, and we have to. The last time also I read, being a poor country, being a law enforcement, weaker country, it doesn't mean that we are forced to eat pesticides, which is banned in one part of the world, but they are free to come into our country. So these are the few issues where I want to draw your attention as a special reporter. Chemicals, and look for the best way how we can address a country like Nepal, economically weaker, politically weaker, and then regulatory weaker, how a citizen from those countries can save this generation and coming generation.
Yeah, thank you for your remarks. As the Special Rapporteur said before, human rights is a baseline for decency. I think you're referring to this very, very well. I'll give the floor. I don't know if there was any other question.
I have four.
Yes, please.
I have four.
Four. Okay. We're getting to the end, but we'll give a final conclusion, answers and conclusions to the panel.
My name is Puyi. I'm from Basel Action Network, but I'm based in the. So I've been working on the issues of waste importation to the region for the past 5 years. And we have a lot of waste coming to Southeast Asia. And even currently now, from last year to this year, in Malaysia, we have managed to seize about 200 plus containers full of electronic scrap that has been illegally brought into the country. But the problem with the case in Malaysia is we notify the government, and the government apprehend the containers, and then that's the end of communication. They don't respond. I mean, they can't. Legally, there's a lot of clauses on confidentiality, so they can't share any information with us. So we don't know what exactly they found in the containers. We don't know what's happening to the containers. They say that they have found e-waste. They announce it in the media. They say that they are sending it back, but we're not sure. And then there have been cases where Malaysia tried to send containers back to countries of origin, but the countries of origin, the parties there, they opened it and then they found that the things in the container is not as was shipped. So on the way back, something happened. And then there was another case in Indonesia when we tried to, when somehow we managed to get the container numbers, and then it wasn't returned to the country of origin, it went to India. And other cases, we tried to get the list of containers that are being shipped back so we can help to monitor, but again, the data is not forthcoming. So, so I was just wondering, in Tunisia, if the government announced that they found it and the CSOs didn't do anything, what do you think would happen? Do you think that the government would would work on intergovernmental collaboration to return the shipments without any CSO intervention? And maybe what can CSOs in Southeast Asia do in this case? Because our governments keep announcing that they've stopped shipments and they've returned it, but we haven't really been working as closely with our governments. So that's the first question. The second question is, so just now, Special Rapporteur mentioned crime. Yes, there is a lot of crime. What if the government is involved in the crime? Corruption is a big problem in Southeast Asia, all over the world, but in Southeast Asia as well. So have you had any instances where the government would say, yes, okay, but you have a feeling maybe they're somewhat involved, and then they said that they would take action and then nothing is done? So what could any one of us do in such situations? And then the third question would be collaboration with others. So here we are talking at the international level, talking about international law, and then we have these government representatives meeting at these international meetings. But once they go home, there are so many other stakeholders, and very, very importantly, we have our local government who are on the ground, who sees all these things happening, and some of them may be allowing it to happen. So to what extent have any one of you worked with what do you call it, different levels of government, and encouraging more dialogue and exchange and enhancing collaboration within the country among different levels of government, federal, state, provincial, local, and also when we're talking about toxics, there has been a lot of NGOs working on public awareness campaigns. Has there been any effectiveness on public awareness campaigns on toxics and I don't know, boycotts for products? Because on one hand, we could force regulation, but we know that corporations have a lot of money to government, so that's one end you could advocate. But what about at the consumer level? And maybe would boycotts be effective? And the last one is about judicial remedy. In Southeast Asia, we don't have much remedy at all for anything related to toxics. We have counterparts who did testing on workers' blood and found high levels of banned substances. But then the government asked them, what do you expect? Oh, we can't do anything, our hands are tied. These are legal industries, what do you hope we can do? And then they tested eggs in Indonesia and found that there are high levels of dioxin. And then the local government had a buy local eggs campaign. They totally discredited the local the NGO report. And then in another case, like in Malaysia, our courts only accept chemical tests or results by our chemistry department. So if we have citizen science, if we collect samples and we test it ourselves, even if we test it in accredited labs, we cannot present it as evidence in court. And the worst is that our department of our chemistry department do not have capacity to test dioxin many different types of PFAS, many types of brominated flame retardant. We just don't have the capacity. So even if the government sends samples to other countries for testing and have the results, the courts don't accept it. So what do we do? What remedy is there when the government is not very responsive, or when the courts are limited by the legal framework? Yeah, what can we do? So that's my broad four questions. Thank you.
So thank you very much for these two very substantial interventions. That's a lot of questions. Some of them would need a specific event to be followed correctly, because it's and it's very, very crucial and very relevant, but would need to be looked at more in depth. But still, I'll start with Semia, because here there was very precise questions on how the authorities would deal in Tunisia compared to the experience that we can have in some of the countries in Southeast Asia.
I have to say that we already have the experience to work with the government, with the national authorities, because whenever we have like some results on some projects, so we bring the report to the government, and they have now we have the habit to work with them. They trust our work, and so that's also it is a long process. So how to compare with the government. So and also we try to not go over our role as a civil society. That means this is when it is about for example, other governments. So we don't talk about with other governments, because this is like a diplomatic level. So we don't go over our role. So we keep within the civil societies between each other, because we know our languages. So and that's the way. The other point I would like to add is, when you work also nowadays we have the social media. So when you have the social media and like a positive social media, because sometimes we have a negative, but when you work on a positive social media and you share the information, and we know now how fast the social media can do the work for you. So I think this is also very important, so to include, because this will be like the part of the journalist to take it and to work on it, or like to investigate on it. So that's a point. For the CSO working together, I think it's really very, very important. But also, I would like to point out that we need also the expertise on CSO, because it's not about only talking, but it is also how data you can offer. We believe all in science, so whenever you provide with the science, so people you put the people in front of their responsibilities. Yes, the scientific data. So that's also very, very important. So to work in science data, also in legal framework, what the regulation is saying about this issue, because this is the way that for example, the governments can understand. When you speak about regulation, they can understand, because this is their part. Also about the campaign on toxic chemicals. I think our experience on toxic chemicals, whenever you campaign on real things, like for example, as said, so on toys, for example, with the chemicals with flame retardants. So we know that the consumers is like the main pillar for the business. So, and the consumers, when the consumer knows it is harmful for his health, or for example, for the health of children or families, they will react. But we have to show this really. So, and they will take off this kind of product. So that's why even for the campaign should be really studied very well how how to give the information about their daily. It's not about to say toxic chemicals, because chemistry is not offered for all to understand. So you should be like, you have your background, so to understand what is chemistry. But when you talk about something real, so of their daily life, I think this is really very important. We can, for example, say what happened, for example, for the campaign on pesticides in Tunisia. So it was like we worked on the highly hazardous pesticides and the pesticide banned. When you say banned and exported to us, it is really something very important for the common population. Like how it goes, like they export for us their ban products. So, and this is like give you like the support to continue on that. So I think it is. The communication is really very important. So you can have, like, for working on, in general, on toxic chemicals, you have mainly at the national level, mainly three pillars. So how you can work with the government, because it is to show them that we support, because this is for your country. It's not about against, it is for your country. So to protect, this is the goal, because the government has the duty to protect the human and the environment of the population. Because if you go to your constituency, so for sure you will have this kind of like a regulation. That's one of the duty. So you show that as a civil society, you have also this duty to do with the government, but with your like role. That's one. The second point, it is like to provide with the scientific data, because it is really very important, with reports, with very, very like direct recommendation. And the third, it is to study the campaign, how it like the campaign, it is should be like focusing on the subject, but should be really very very efficient in the way that people, they will react to that. And you have also the support of the journalists, because the journalists, they work really, they have their role to play in a country when they highlight an issue.
Thank you very much. We hear the educator here speaking strongly, and you have quite an experience to share on the. Thank you very much, Semia. And indeed, we saw also in your example that the authorities did follow after the 1 month check once it arrived. There they did fulfill their obligations. So of course that's probably a good example to show to other countries that you need to check, and that comes from an official authorities in another southern country, country from the global south. So now let me turn to Marcos Orellana. There was a very long list of very relevant and important questions. We are taking notes of those. Some of these will inspire us for future talks on the Geneva Toxic-Free Talks. So thank you very much for raising these points, because I think they will need to more in-depth scrutiny and discussions. But I'm sure there's a number of issues you would like to take up, and also perhaps share with us your final words of conclusion of this discussion, because I know that some people want to talk with you afterwards on a number of issues, and you'll have to run to your next appointment. So we are bringing this discussion to an end. So, Marcos, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Yves, and thank you so much for the question. Let me offer. Please allow me to offer a couple reflections again in somewhat of a telegraphic form because of time. But on your point first of industrial accidents repeating themselves, one of the rationales of torts law, so the ability of people that suffer harm out of in non-contractual relations, is not only to obtain money for the harm suffered, but that these compensations systemically will induce, in this case, the businesses and the factories to invest in prevention. But if the tort system doesn't work, there's no inducement. And so there's cutting corners, because if there's no investment, there's more profit. And so some people make money out of other people's harm, and that is certainly an immoral situation. So that's a big problem, of course, and related to this, as a way, this is civil, in private relations, but there's a role for government in setting up a regulation. That includes the ability to monitor. Well, that involves capacity. If there's no money to pay for the gas to buy a pickup truck to go and do the monitoring, and even if at the end of the monitoring you have the results, but the fines that may be imposed are illusory compared to the profits made by the companies, which also often happens, well, then the system breaks down. And that's what we're seeing, unfortunately, all over the world. In respect of the point that you make about toxic additives in plastics, I think this, and toys, I think this underscores the importance of the Plastic Pollution Treaty under negotiation, which for some, for the petrochemical industries and the states that sponsor them or host them, they wish to see a treaty narrowly focused on strengthening waste management so that there's less leakage of plastics going into the sea, and then problem solved. But that's only a small part of it, as you rightly point out. The chemical threat posed by plastic pollution starts from the moment that these toxic additives are added to plastics. They have implications when plastics are used, so exposure of children in the example that you mentioned. But then they also, and I wish to highlight this or underline it, they place an obstacle to circularity, because it makes it impossible then to recycle those plastics without creating a concentration of chemical hazards in the recycled plastics. So that's where the controlling chemicals of concern in plastics is a key element of the treaty under negotiation, among several others. And as you rightly point out, we could have a whole conversation on the Plastic Pollution Treaty. A couple of thoughts on what you're mentioning in terms of the lack of information disclosed by governments in certain instances where containers or waste shipments are found in the country. It offers me two things, the opportunity to say two things. One is that access to information is a fundamental gateway right when it comes to environmental policy. And this is something that my mandate and other environmental related mandates of the Human Rights Council have emphasized over the years on and on, because without information, it is virtually impossible to take decisions. So that's one thing. Second thing, this is more of a worldview. Things happen when civil society mobilizes and there's visibility. Otherwise, governments are very quick to brush things under the rug and try to make them go away. But it's with activism that things don't go away and issues get addressed. And third point I thought I'd mention on this is that in many countries of the world, there's still the mentality that public servants are servants of the state administration, but not of the people. And human rights law and policy would put forward is that the legitimacy of authority rests in its ability to advance human rights. And so that creates a lot of challenge to that mode of thinking of administration bureaucrats as serving a self-sustaining state instead of serving the people. And that is an issue of mentality that I think we have a long way to address. Secondly, you ask about, well, what do we do if government is involved in crime? And unfortunately, this happens all too often. When it comes to human rights law and policy, we have in history too many instances of state-sponsored terrorism of state, so systematic violations of human rights. Dictatorships is one instance where this takes place. The approach to dealing with this is on the one hand the recognition that there are global public interests at stake, that what's happening within the boundaries of a state in respect of human rights is not the province only of interest of that state. There is a role for the international community to be vigilant and to put pressure for these things to end, and that's where mechanisms and procedures like special procedure mandate holders of the Human Rights Council, so special rapporteurs, are so important, because they bring international attention to such kind of practices. Let me give you a concrete example. I have done a lot of work on the use of mercury in small-scale gold mining. This is a problem, a challenge in a situation that occurs in East Asia, in Western Africa, in the Amazon rainforest. So it has a global dimension. Let's recall mercury is persistent. It doesn't go away. It travels in the atmosphere. And in many instances, the price of gold, miners have been able to buy off legislators in countries, even members of the judiciary. And often it has been the case that they bought off police and the military as well. And so that's where denouncing those practices and shedding light on them becomes so important. I am running out of time, but let me point out that in terms of public awareness and campaigns that you mentioned, I recently conducted a country visit to Samoa, a small island in the Pacific, where the government is engaged in a public awareness campaign for new measures for collecting plastic bottles or recovery of certain waste streams. Now, in that context, that visit, I learned that, and it's not unique to Samoa, Coca-Cola company had the practice of using glass bottles and filling them and refilling, washing them, refilling them, reusing them. And then it changed into plastic bottles. Has there been any boycott on Coca-Cola plastic bottles? No. Samoa, like many other countries in the world, is a very small country that is dependent on imports, and it doesn't have economies of scale that it would allow it to say to the market, these are the specifications of the products that we will allow in our borders. It can't do that. It doesn't have that capacity or ability. So it relies on standards set in the exporting countries, and then also it relies on the practices of corporations, and that's where corporate accountability for human rights, that's where international instruments like the Plastic Pollution Treaty setting standards for plastic products becomes so important. So those are a few observations on your questions. With 2 minutes left to go, in conclusion, I only want to thank you, Yves, once again for convening the Geneva Toxic Free Talks. There's such a rich discussion. It's impossible to summarize it in one line. But perhaps I can share that from the perspective of the mandate. The constant need for education, the constant need for discussion and for awareness raising in regards to the interaction between chemicals, wastes, and human rights is also fertile ground for mobilization, for community building, for thinking about ways of addressing problems. And one point that you may have heard me say previously is that with the global recognition of the right to a healthy environment, not only do we have new legal tools to address the global crisis of toxic pollution and biodiversity loss and climate change, but there's a moment of awareness that can help us understand our humanity's interrelation with nature, and that can unlock new forms of thinking that can help us get out of the mess that we find ourselves in. So these talks are, in a way, a step in that direction, a way of moving us forward. So I want to thank you again for convening us, and for everyone that has participated. Semi, it's been a real pleasure having the opportunity to have this exchange with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to both of you. It's been a very rich discussion indeed. And we don't have that often the opportunity to see the articulation of the work which you've been doing in Tunisia so successfully, but also how it implied this international mechanism. So thank you really for, even for me, because I have read already a lot, but I've continued to learn in your own presentation, and so how the things were working together. And I hope this is something that others, thinking our friends from the International Pollutant Elimination Network who are with us this week, will be also be able to hear more, and because that can be very useful for their own work. I'd like also here to extend our thanks to the Geneva Environmental Network. It's a pleasure to work with the whole team, and today specifically Harvey, who made it possible to have this discussion. But without the Geneva Environmental Network, it would not be possible to have this type of exchange, and also not just to stay in our small bubble in Geneva, but thanks also to the people who are joining us online to be able to participate. This event will be is recorded, and so it will be on the website of the Geneva Environmental Network. So encourage all of those who thought it would be interested, or who have an interest in this discussion, to be able to go back on the website of the Gen and to listen. And you have a huge number of absolutely fascinating panels, not only the Geneva Toxic Free Talks, but also a few others, now many other discussions, which are really a very valuable resource. And my last word is for those who have joined us today, because it is indeed a very, very heavy negotiation. And on the other side of the city, with the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions meeting of the parties. So really a very warm thanks for coming here and for what you have shared with you. And with this is an end to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.